Our journey starts from the Dariali Gorge. From here, we will go through a historical path that had utmost military political significance for the entire Middle East. It can be assumed that all of the main events in Georgian history unfolded in the context of the struggle for the Caucasus Highway. This road crossed Georgia from the Dariali Gorge in the north to Hornabuji in the south. From Hornabuji, it passed to Persia and joined the Great Silk Road. Lots of cars pass through the Dariali Gorge every day. Travelers enjoy its beautiful nature, although perhaps few, if any, have noticed a fragment of an old road carved into the rock, which is still visible in several places. We have called this an old road, but this claim is controversial since it was cut in 1855. It is not hard to imagine how difficult it must have been to cross Dariali before this road was laid. And despite all of these difficulties, it is one of the oldest routes traveled by humankind. By this road, ancient humans entered the Caucasus. Merchant caravans have been moving intensively since ancient times, and northern and southern civilizations have been connected. The Dariali Gorge has always been associated with progress and development. At that time, cutting a narrow path in these cliffs also meant progress, and it was a significant achievement. Today, right under this rock-cut road, in the heart of this mountain, a large power plant has been built. Consequently, the Dariali Gorge has acquired another important function along with border protection and transit functions. As was common in the medieval world, the defense signal system covered the entire territory of Georgia. Consequently, all sections of the road from Dariali to Hornabuji were controlled. Larger fortresses and cities, if not directly in sight, were connected using intermediate watchtowers. The fortress may not have been large, but it was usually built on a high and inaccessible place, from where it was possible to control the surrounding area, even with a small garrison. The fortress had many functions. It served as a shelter, storage of weapons and food, a headquarters, a watchtower, a gathering place for troops, a springboard for attacking the enemy, and also a point for collecting taxes. Costs for maintaining a fortress were much cheaper than keeping an army fighting for it. The fortress neutralized the numerical advantage of the enemy. Therefore, fighting from the fortresses was an important part of the Georgian military strategy. The fortresses were even more important when it was connected with other fortresses and was part of a unified defense system. In the Terek Valley, there are ruins of a fortress or tower at every footstep. Some of them are relatively new, built on the foundation of an old building, below which there is an even older layer, and so on. All of these fortresses were connected and formed a unified defense system. Figuratively speaking, the Terek Valley itself was one of the great fortresses protecting Georgia from ancient times. The Dariali fortress sent a signal to the Gaveleti fortress, Gaveleti to the naturally fortified village of Sno, then from Sno to Stepansminda, then Stepansminda to the Arsha fortress. The Arsha fortress connected Sno Valley and Terek Valley, and so on. Information from Hevi was transmitted to Gudamakari, Mtiuleti, Shavhevsureti, and the non-mountainous parts of Georgia. After all this time, we too let out smoke from the top of the fortress, but fortunately, it is a sign of peace and not an alarm as it was in the past. In addition to the main Caucasian highway, which went through Chevi, its numerous branches were connected to the North Caucasus and the Mshav-Surati through Soa-Kisani valleys, Tileti, Tbilisi, and other parts of the country. It is one of the strategically most important places in the Caucasus. This road connected the northern and southern civilizations. This is the road which, in different periods, was trodden by the trade caravans, ancient humans, and huge armies. This place is protected on one side by completely impassable rock cliffs, and on the other, by the abyss. Whoever owned this place controlled the Caucasus. That is why it was here, between these two natural obstacles, that King Vakhtang Gorgasali erected a fortress in the 5th century, thus creating the Northern Gate of Georgia. The Caucasian highway in Georgia started from the Dariali fortress. People already lived here in the 5th and 6th centuries BC. To the north of the fortress, about a mile away, at the narrowest point of the valley, are the remains of a wall. This place was part of a unified system and received the first attack. A medieval Georgian historian dated the construction of the first fortress in Dariali to around the 2nd century BC. However, the road from Dariali to Khornabuji became the main economic and political highway of the country in the 5th century during the reign of King Vakhtang Gorgasali. Without the secure locking of this north gate, both the kings and the peasants' families were in constant danger and the country's development was hindered. As soon as 15-year-old Vakhtang Gorgasali took the throne, he made defending and strengthening the Dariali Gorge the most important task. The king launched his first military campaign in the northern direction. There was a personal reason for that. King Vakhtang was 10 years old when the nomads invading from the north defeated Kartli and kidnapped his 3-year-old sister, Miranduk. 5 years later, Vakhtang Gorgasali gathered the noblemen and said, "The sorrow for my sister's fate wounds my heart like a sword of fire, and I prefer death to such a life if I do not rescue my sister." King Vakhtang carried out a very successful military campaign in the north, after which he built a fortress in Dariali. This fortress was guarded by the local population, and no one could enter the country without the Georgian king's permission. In order to protect the control of the highway, King Vakhtang started a grand construction. He built the fortresses of Dariali and Khornabuji, protecting the country from the north and the south. And he also built the fortress cities along the road, Ujarma, Buchorma, Cheremi, and Tbilisi. It should also be noted that the Dariali fortress was constantly in the center of international attention as it closed one of the main passes of the Caucasus. The Dariali fortress defended not only the security of Georgia, but also the entire South Caucasus and the Middle East. 2 or 3 kilometers south of the Tamar forest, there was the village of Gvaleti. Here, on this mountain, was a very strong fortress of Gvaleti, which protected this valley together with Tamar fortress. There are two beautiful waterfalls near the Gvildeti Fortress. Who knows, maybe once upon a time, King Vakhtang Gorgasali stood in the midst of these waterfalls. The beautiful Chteb Valley joins the Terek Valley from the right. From here, the road went to Chechnya, Ingushetia, and Hevsureti through Juta. By the way, in modern times, mountaineering has been practiced in this valley for decades. Many alpinists and tourists have visited here, and whoever has come to this valley once will remember the beauty of this place for a lifetime. To the south of the Gvildeti Fortress, on top of a mountain, there is a village of Sto, which, in turn, overlooks Stepantsminda. This village, with its history, architecture, and its location, is a real national treasure. There are such villages in other parts of Georgia, and they need special care. In the past, these villages defended Georgia militarily, but now they have significant cultural and economic perspective. In Stepantsminda, at the foot of the Kuro Mountain on a steep rocky slope, there was a walled tower overlooking the village of Sto to the north and almost the entire Terek Valley. According to folklore, there used to be a village on the site of present-day Stepantsminda. Once it was threatened by a landslide from Mount Kuro, but fortunately, Stepan the monk managed to warn the population and the people survived. The settlement was named Stepantsminda in honor of this monk. The Grigeti Trinity Church can be seen on the mountain near Stepantsminda against the background of the Mkimvartsveri Peak. Both human creation and natural wonder make a unique impression against the background of the Mkimvartsveri. Preserved here is the meeting building where the elders of Chevi met and made decisions. The long stone chairs of the meeting building have survived to this day. Grigeti Trinity Church allegedly was the treasure trove of Msketa during the war, and cross of St. Nino, the enlightener of Georgians, rested here. According to the legend, the stone for building the temple was brought from neighboring villages by oxen on a driverless cart. A shepherd brought water to the masons working on the site, while his herd was left unattended. But wild animals did not harm his sheep. At the confluence of the Terek and Snow rivers, on the left bank of the Terek, there is the famous Arsha Fortress, one of the largest and most inaccessible fortresses in the Terek Valley and throughout Georgia, which is almost invisible from below and can be perceived as a rocky cliff. There is a path from the village of Arsha to this fortress which leads to a door cut in the rock. There is a cross carved on a massive chunk of rock at the fortress's entrance, and there are several red crosses on the mountain's rocky slope. We approached the Arsha fortress. We walked uphill and saw a large rocky slope. However, neither the man-made wall nor the entrance seemed to be here. Only huge boulders. At last, our operator noticed the narrow doors cut into the rock. The path leading to it could not be passed by two people walking side by side. We entered the fortress through this gate, and all of us are very curious about what we will see there. I have often visited Heavy since my youth, but I had not visited the Arsha fortress, and now I am happy to have a chance to look down from up here. It is not an exaggeration to say that anyone who comes up to the Arsha fortress and looks around from here will once again be convinced of what a wonderful planet we have. The Snow Valley can be seen on one side, the Terek Valley on the other. Here is Stepantsminda, there is Karkucha, and at the end of the valley, there is the village of Kobe. Arsha was one of the strategic strongholds of the northern border defense system of Georgia. The castle is guarded by enormous rocks on three sides, and there is a narrow entrance carved into the rock on the fourth side. Inside the fortress, there was a fairly large living space. If necessary, even a few thousand men could be accommodated here. Today, the fortress no longer has a defensive function, but it is still one of those places where your soul is opened up and you become a better person. We started our journey from the fortress built by King Vakhtang Gorgasali in the Darieli Gorge, past the Kavaleti fortress, the village of Stro, Stepantsminda, and then came to the Arsha fortress. From here, we will continue our journey and enter the Snow Valley. We will see the village of Juta and go through the Busajiri Pass to Gudamakari. The village of Juta is located at the end of the Snow Valley. The modern road does not go beyond Juta. However, in the old days, when the main means of transportation was by foot and on horseback, this small village was an important crossroad. These roads had both military and economic purposes. If you leave early in the morning and go straight to this ridge, you will have to walk among the snowy peaks in this amazingly beautiful nature, and by the evening you will reach the Darieli Gorge. In my youth, I walked along this route, but in the opposite direction, from Darieli to Juta. If you go up the Juta River, the road will split into two. One path goes to the village of Arkhoti, the other to the village of Roshka. Down this road, just a few kilometers to the left, there is a road that leads to the Bursachiri Pass. In the old days, these trails were used very intensively, and now they are regaining their function. This place is still crowded, but instead of caravans and military units, tourists are everywhere, enjoying views and nature. Up from Juta, there is a beautiful rocky massif of Chakri, which is a favorite place for rock climbers. However, just walking towards it brings great pleasure to everyone. Until a major road was built on the Javari Pass in the 19th century, the main Caucasian highway went through the Snow Valley to Gudamakari and then to Pasanauri. At the end of Snow Valley, near the village of Karkucha, there is a road on the right leading to Gudamakari. This was the central route traveled by the caravans. We also followed the path, but it turned out to be an avalanche had blocked our road and the car would no longer move. It is difficult for a car to make its way through an avalanche, but it would not be a problem for caravans moving on foot and horseback. The caravan departing from Dariali in the morning would reach Karkucha in the evening. This is day 1. It would take another day from Karkucha to Cholki. Then 2 days from Cholki to Pasanauri, and from Pasanauri to Jinvali. So it would take a maximum of 4 or 5 days for the caravan to travel from Dariali to Jinvali. Tourists don't need the same amount of time if they do not get distracted by the views. However, they will definitely enjoy their journey. We decided that from here, one part of our group will continue the journey on foot, because this is the transportation means used most often through history. The rest will be the drive to Javari Pass and meet us in the Gudamakari Valley. We traveled basically without luggage and soon crossed the pass without complications, enjoying the beautiful scenery around. Bursachiri is the name of a village located at 1,920 meters above sea level, and the pass was also named after this village. Below you can see the village of Bursachiri. More precisely, the place where the village once was. It is a 15 to 20-minute drive from here. This was the historical highway that caravans used to travel for centuries. Today, this trail is mostly used by shepherds. However, the number of tourists is growing as this route is a real paradise for hikers. So we crossed the Bursachiri Pass and arrived in Gudamakari. Gudamakari is sometimes perceived as part of Mtihuleti, although it is a separate historical geographical location. One of the most important routes of the Caucasian Road, connecting the Aragvi Valley with the Dariali Gorge, passed through Gudamakari. The road to Gudamakari also needed proper defense. For this purpose, on the right bank of the Bakurhevi River, near the village of Pakhvilji, strategically placed on a sharp sword-like mountain, was the Makvilo, or Sword, Fortress. This fortress overlooked both the central road to Gudamakari and the relatively smaller path to Hefsureti. There was virtually no section along this entire route from Dariali to Hornabuji that was not controlled by the central government. From Dariali, we arrived in Pasanawuri. Here, the black Aragvi of Gudamakari and the white Aragvi of Mtialeti joined together. In the Turek Valley, we saw that the road near the village of Snow was split in two. This time, we crossed the Bursachiri Pass and came to Pasanawuri through the Gudamakari Valley. However, there was a second route that crossed the Javari Pass, led to the Aragvi Valley, and joined the way from Gudamakari near Pasanawuri. So before we continue our journey to Jin Valley, we will go back to the Turek Valley to take this second route.